Oh, please, no. Just don't get my weird ponytail. Doesn't look that weird, does it? No. All right, cool. All right, so for throwing a plate on the wheel, and sorry for the quick wheel change, but I realized that when you're throwing a plate on the wheel, it's a very low and shallow form that you're taking off of there. And so when you go to take it off the wheel, try to imagine when it's all soft and plasticky, how are you going to get it off the wheel without warping the plate, right? It's next to impossible to do. So when you're throwing a low shallow form that you're not going to be able to take off of the plate, off of the wheel very easily, you're going to throw with a bat, okay? So these bats, you may have noticed before that they have these holes already like drilled in there. They're in there because, and you might have noticed in the wheel head that there was holes in the wheel head, and that's because these little pins here are called bat pins, and you put them in those holes, and then you put the bat on there, and then you throw on the head of the bat so that when you're done, you can take the whole bat off and your plate doesn't get warped, okay? So, that I switched to this wheel because it already has bat pins in it. They're a little bit on the loose side. They should be a little bit tighter, but we're going to roll with it. So, this little doohickey right here is very helpful, I believe. It's just called, I don't know what this new one is called. They used to be called bat grabbers. And basically what it is it's like you make a sandwich, and this is like the meat of your sandwich, and it's very, very sticky material. And it helps so that when you put the bat on top of it, that the bat doesn't chatter back and forth when you're trying to throw. I only have 3 of the blue ones, but I have like 4 of the red ones, okay? The blue ones are the newer ones, and they're pretty nice, but you have to keep them wet all the time. You can't let them dry out. So when you're done with them, you have to, you know, stick them under the faucet, rinse them, and then put them back in the bag that they came in so that they stay wet. Okay? I will buy more of them because I was testing them out. I just bought them last year, but they're pretty nice, so I will buy more. It's just a pain in the booty to have to keep them wet. All right, so then I'm going to put my bat on top of that. Make sure it's nice and stuck down, and now I've got my throwing surface ready to go here. All right, you are going to take more clay than you are used to using to throw a plate. What is that? You can say.
Wheels not plugged in.
My wheel's not plugged in. Step number 1, plug in wheel. Oh, yeah. Really good YouTube. It's because I did my quick wheel change, that's why. Sorry, guys. Step number 2, make sure power is on and spinning counterclockwise. Okay, got that. All right, so you're gonna, I've probably got about 3 times the amount of clay, and that's because when you throw a plate, everything that I taught you, well, I shouldn't say everything that I taught you, but some of the things that I taught you, you're gonna throw out the window now, which is, when I taught you guys to throw, you're supposed to have a 1/4 inch floor and 1/4 inch walls, right? Well, not the case with the plate. You're gonna have a really thick floor when you do a plate, probably like 1 inch. And then we're going to trim away for the foot. And especially with this one, because one of your requirements for this particular assignment is that you have to have a way to incorporate that wire in the foot so it can be hung, you know, on the wall. So you need to have a foot that's much deeper when you trim it, if you're doing this. So don't be scared by the amount of clay. It's because you're going to have a lot of thickness there. Alright, so centering is the same as usual. It's just a little more clay, so definitely posture is going to be key. And one of the things that when you're starting to throw forms that aren't just cylinders, and you got to think about the shape that the finished object is going to be before you start. So this is going to be very low and shallow, so I want when I open this, I want this to be low and shallow. I don't want to open it high. So I'm going to actually bring it down. And when you're working with more clay, you're going to see I'm going to start using different body parts than you do. So you can just lean on it with your whole arm. I'm going to bring it down lower and shallower before I even start. Hey, Emily G down there. Can you do me a favor and get me a variety of different ribs?
Ribs?
Yeah, from that extra tool bin. Like some metal ones, some wood ones. Thanks, you're the best. Okay, so low and shallow here to get started. That's good. That'll do. Actually, if you could find a couple of wood ones too, that would be very nice. Okay, I don't know why I'm using this. It's just there, so I am. All right, so now, since I'm going to start with low and shallow, now I've got less work to do because I'm going to open low and shallow. So I've had this debate with my other pottery teacher about plates, and I always said plates and bowls were different than cylinders, and she said no, a plate is really just a cylinder, and she's right. It's just a really low, shallow cylinder. So there's going to be less pulling of the walls and more forming of the floor going on. So when I open this, I feel a little air bubble in there, so I'm going to pop it. When I open this, I'm bearing in mind that I'm keeping that floor thicker intentionally. I want it about 1 inch thick because I want to do that trimming. So, I kind of stick the pin tool in there. Now the distance between the tip of my finger and the end, that's maybe a little thicker than I want, but it's close. Good. I'm going to say that's about 1 inch. So I'm going to run with that. And now all I have to do is form the floor. So now that I've got it open, same hand positioning as normal, I'm just making a cylinder. Relax my pressure and get more water when I need it. Now, whatever part of the floor I form, this is my eating surface. You can have a small eating surface with a wide brim. You can have a wide eating surface with a small brim. That's up to you. But you have to think about whatever this circle is, that's how much space you have for your food. Okay? So, if I want this to be bigger, but I run out of space, I'm actually going to extend it. I'm going to feed it out onto the bat here. And so what I'm going to make myself a clean area here. And as I do this, I'm not only going to be pulling out, but this hand is kind of pushing down. So I'm forcing the clay back down onto the wheel. So I can extend it out, but I'm forcing that clay down so that I can make it bigger, if I want. One of the things that I do when I'm pulling a plate, and I'm still not sure if it actually does anything or if it's just superstition, but I was taught this a while back, that when you're pulling all in one direction, especially in a long, big, flat surface like this, those clay particles kind of like line up, and it makes them easier for them to crack, or the plate to crack, right in the middle there. So I always do a little bit of a reverse pull. Meaning once I get the flatness done, I'm going to start from the edge, I'm going to go back in just to kind of compress the clay and hopefully avoid what's called an S-crack, where you get this crack right in the middle of their plate in the shape of an S. Okay? I also sometimes use my ribs, and Emily got me my favorite plate rib, which is the wood one here. And I can kind of compress and define that eating area. Now I gotta be really careful here because I don't want to really, this rib is just a little bit too long. I don't want to go over center because if I do I can gouge it. So I'm really paying attention to what's going on here, and I'm not putting too much pressure. I'm applying more pressure on this side right here. Okay, so now let's say I'm like fine with that being my eating surface. Now I pull the walls. Okay, you don't want to pull them straight out. What am I doing? You don't want to pull them straight out because it's very easy to lay things down, but it's hard to make them stand back up. So even though I'm going to eventually end up with them like this, I'm going to start with just a straight cylinder. So plates are actually not too hard because they're not tall cylinders. And you can make that brim of that plate as wide as you want to. Depending on how high you make it. I said the diameter of the plate should be around 10 inches. Doesn't matter to me whether that's an eating surface or brim, I don't care. It's just a plate about this size. All right, so once I get my thickness, then I'm going to start thinking about laying this rim down a little bit more. And you have choices about that transition. You can make it a 90-degree angle. You can make it more shallow so that the eating surface and the brim all like blend into each other. That's up to you. But you should think about it. Because now all I have to do is when I do this pull, I'm going to pull out with my inside hand and I'm going to allow that brim to start laying down. And I don't know if I showed you guys this too, but I'll show you this. And I never lay mine down totally horizontal. I always want it up a little because it wants to fall even more in the kiln. So I always leave my brim slightly angled up. And I'm going to get my head way down here so I can see. So now I can choose. Do I want to crispen up that eating surface and really make a definition between the brim, and this may depend on the design you chose. And there. Do I want to make it more gradual? Do I want to take this and really flatten my rim and smooth it out? Those decisions are kind of up to you. I do suggest before you're done, you can either get a chamois like this one or a little piece of plastic bag. And you see how my rim looks kind of rough? Really, really gentle. We're not applying pressure here, but before I'm done, I take this little chamois and I wrap it around the edge and I just fatten up that lip and make it nice and clean. Okay? Right behind you, Emily, there's a jar of underglaze. Can you hand that to me? I'm going to show you one more thing. So since you guys are doing Sgraffito or Mishima on this, especially if you're doing Sgraffito, oh, you see that fan brush? Can I get that one? Oops, I meant to do that. What stages of clay can I apply ongo or underglaze? Guys, if you're hand building, you can start cleaning. What stages of clay? Does anybody remember when I can do this? Leather hard. Kind of a junky brush. Leather hard, what else? Plastic, clearly, because I'm applying it right now. Leather hard, plastic, and when else can you do it? Bisqueware, because if you do Mishima, you got to do it at bisque, right? And that other brush. I don't like this brush. But you can get a nice, clean, even coating right here while it's on the wheel, especially if you're doing Sgraffito and you're going to paint the whole thing. Might as well use the wheel. Man, what's wrong with all my brushes? You are going to need a couple of coats of this though. So you're going to want to put it on, let it dry, second coat, maybe a third coat, especially depending on the color. Like yellow, I had to do like 4 or 5 coats. Okay? So part 2 will be the trimming demo. I will say though, before you're done, you always want to wire underneath it. So I'm not going to take it off, but I'm gonna wire underneath it. So my fingers are down like this, keeping them down and pulling towards me. I'm not gonna attempt to move it, but I must do a wire underneath it before I am done, okay? And I'm gonna do my underglaze a little bit better now so it doesn't look like half finished. But I think as far as the demo and the video goes, that's pretty much it. Did you guys have any questions? Easy, right?
Yes.
No problem. All right, we're good.